Hi, I'm with the director and writer producer of The War Between, DEBORAH CORREA and Ron Yungul. Did I pronounce that right?
That's correct for me, anyway.
Yeah, that's good, Alan. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, let's just start off and talk about The War Between. Can you give me, I guess, Ron, you're probably the best person, but can you give me the basic logline of The War Between and then talk little bit about how you got into the project?
Well, it's set in 1862 in Arizona during the Civil War, and it's about two soldiers, one fighting for the North, one for the South. So they're on opposing sides of the conflict, and they end up getting stranded in the Sonoran Desert together. So they've got to find some way to cooperate and get along and set aside their differences and hostilities in order to survive. In a nutshell, that's the story.
Yeah. So one of the things that is unique about your story is that it takes place in the Southwest here in, I believe it's Arizona, but you talk about, that California and Arizona were involved in the Civil War, which is something is kind of new to me. And so how did the story come about? Was it just a matter of research and trying to figure?
Well, actually it all started when I was watching The Good, the Bad, the Ugly many years ago. And I think it was a longer version, like the director's cut or something. And there's a long sequence out in the desert. Eli Wallach and Clint Eastwood end up in the middle of this artillery duel between the Northern and Southern forces. And I just chalked it up to artistic license, thinking, well, they shot this in Spain and in the desert in Spain, and it was kind of an exotic location. And then I did some research and found out it was actually portraying an actual battle called the Battle of Glorieta Pass in the Southwest. And then that led me down that rabbit hole of research in the Civil War in the Southwest. And it's just a little known corner of the Civil War that I wasn't aware of. And I think a lot of people just aren't aware of. The opening year and a half of the Civil War, the South had invaded Arizona territory and were trying to take it over in order to gain access to the silver and gold deposits in order to finance the war. And part of the Union forces was consisted of the California Cavalry, which were organized in basically Los Angeles area, and then they marched into Arizona territory to push the Southerners out, which they did. And shortly after the time period that we portray in our movie, the Southerners retreated back into Texas, and the other forces scattered and went east, and that was the end of that.
Yeah, interesting. All right. So let me ask you this. Our audience is primarily independent filmmakers, people who are trying to make movies just like you. What were the challenges in terms of, what were the hurdles in terms of getting the script written and then ultimately getting it produced or getting it greenlit?
Well, I actually met Deborah through her sister, who I had worked with, and she had kind of told Deborah the pitch that I'd given her about this movie. And it just turns out that we have very similar interests in movies, and we're both eager to make a feature. And I had originally conceived this as a two-hander, real low budget film, just, as I had said, two guys wrestling in the sand, basically. But it turned into something a little more ambitious than that. It was hard.
I think the biggest challenges were beyond the financial aspect of it. It was casting. We had this idea that we could potentially get a name actor, but if you're not established and you don't have like a lot of money for it, it's a delusional idea, unless you're friends with somebody, they're like happy to do it. Right. So I had to get that out of my head. And our casting director, Bella, she was a very like encouraging force for casting. And she was like, we're going to find the right people for this role. And it was literally that week we found Damien and Sam, and they were exactly that character that we had envisioned for those two roles. And so once we got past that casting hurdle, everything else felt so much like it was more doable. It was more doable, and it happened. We found a good line producer, crewed up. And I always say it's like, if I can picture it, I can execute it. And I felt like it was visualizing every step of the way, getting there, even to as we were shooting it.
Well, what was it about the script that sparked interest in you in terms of wanting to direct this and wanting to tell this story?
Well, initially it was what Ron said. It was like a two-hander. We're like, okay, we can definitely do this as an indie film. And then as he wrote it, it like expanded and included more roles. And I was like, oh, this is going to be much more ambitious. But it was the setting. I'd never heard of the Civil War being fought out west. I'd never heard of the California column who pushed the Confederacy out of Southern California. I'd never heard about that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a part of our history I want to know more about. And I would like to, excavate and learn and explore. And so that curiosity really interested me in it. And it was also the spark of something about this really resonates for today as well. And the backdrop of having that told in a Western, it felt like relevant, and there was something just really exciting about that for me from both of those angles.
Yeah. So one of the things that I notice about indie film is a lot of them are shot in the forest, and a lot of them are shot in the desert. It sounds like you agree with me. To you, what are the advantages beyond the obvious of shooting in the desert, and what are the challenges of doing that?
It's funny you said that, because we premiered at the Phoenix Film Festival, and one of the films I watched or attended there was an indie film about a daughter and father hiking out in the forest. So to your point.
Well, really, because it was based, like the catalyst for the story is based on the most Western battle of the Civil War, which is the Battle of Picacho Peak. We actually shot at that location, and that location is in the desert. So the setting of the story lends itself to telling it in the desert. And challenge-wise, I think it was like the battle sequences that we shot that day was like the hottest day of the year. We were on this mountain. The guys were in these wool jackets on their horses. It was really hot and really challenging. So there was like a lot of those kinds of almost, I would say, like environmental challenges with the desert and keeping on top of hydration. I remember at one point, Damien was like, I'm not going to drink water. I'm going to live this role. I'm going to live this. Like, you better drink water. You're not being able to act the scene. But we actually had a lot of fun doing it. We had a really committed crew, and our local crew in Arizona, they were great. We were like climbing the mountains in the heat with the gear, to get some of these shots. And you're kind of, sometimes you're in the middle of nowhere and far from the trailers. And so you have to figure out, your logistics of how you're going to move around and shoot. And Evan, the cinematographer, I've worked with him since I went to Emerson College with him. And we just did as much pre-visualization prep for the locations, because you're in the middle of nowhere and you have expanse. And we put flags where we're going to actually shoot the shots and made sure that we knew what frames we were going to use for these shots. And, actually, Ron and I met Roger Corman a few months after we shot the film.
Oh, wow.
He just passed away. So his words of advice to that day were like, you better know where you're putting the camera. It's like, when you're short on time, you better know where you're putting the camera. And he was like, how many days did you have? And we're like, we had 15. He's like, whoa. If I had 15 back then, I would have felt like I was in the big leagues, because I think he would shoot his films in 10 days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's the master of the short shoot, and encouraging all the people he mentored into the short shoot. So you shot in Arizona. So I have to ask then, is the crew out there, the resources available in Arizona are, I would like to think that they know what they're doing, and they're a big resource in making films.
Yeah. So we worked with Monsoon Production Services, and Lenny helped us get everything crewed up with their team. And then we worked with a first AD and second AD, Rusty Case and Tamara McDaniels. And we had this core crew of people who knew what they were doing. And so we were able to move fast. And I think that was like a big, big help for it. And once they saw, like, they knew the story, we saw how they saw our commitment to it. Like Ron, Evan, and I we believed in what we were shooting, and we knew we could do it. And it kind of built the morale for the entire crew too. So it was like we had a lot of support getting it done, and they knew what they were doing. And we were able to do it fairly quickly in terms of the prep too. Like our pre-production window was very small. I wish we had more time, but you know, we pulled it off, and it was because we had such a great crew and our collaboration worked.
I just want to say, going back to the inspiration for it, it wasn't just The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, but another favorite film of mine is sort of a little known film called Hell in the Pacific with Toshiro Mifune and Lee Marvin. I think Richard Donner directed it, which is a very similar setup. It's two enemy soldiers that are trapped on an island in the South Pacific, and it's just simply their struggle to get off this island and back to where they need to go, and they learn how to cooperate and build a raft and so forth to do that. And you know, the ocean is, some people call the ocean a desert, you know, and so it's either the ocean, it's a mountain, or it's the desert. And so it was the desert we picked. And the inciting incident is the Battle of Picacho Peak, and we actually filmed it there on location during the same month that the battle took place. And I like to say, you know, the landscape is pretty striking, and it's just covered with saguaro cactuses, and some of those cactuses are hundreds of years old. So I like to say, you know, they talk about Civil War battlefields in the East as having witness trees. Well, we had witness cactuses there that probably were there when the battle actually took place.
Amazing. Yeah, and you bring up your inspiration, just that idea of two people who are on the literal opposite sides of the tracks, and realizing that we're just human beings, and we all have our, you know, we have more in common than we don't. And I think that's what stories like this are, why they're so attractive.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's part of the thing that compelled us to make this movie now.
Absolutely. So let me, did you shoot, this is a post-pandemic shoot?
We shot it. It was kind of like, we shot it April last year.
Okay.
So we still had to do like COVID testing and
right. But it was after you weren't shut down for it, or you weren't. Okay. So the reason I ask is the movie industry is in a weird place right now. And I feel like, you know, we talk a lot about here that maybe Hollywood isn't the dream, and that maybe if you really want to become a true independent filmmaker or a true filmmaker and tell your stories, Hollywood is not the dream. What were your challenges, and what do you see as the challenges and the opportunities for independent filmmakers today in light of everything that's going on in Hollywood?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question, Alan.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
I ask everybody this, so
I mean, it's important. I like that Hollywood's maybe not the dream, because I think that Hollywood is a very gatekeepered industry, and I think that there's a lot of filmmakers who have things to say and are talented. And it's kind of like what Cord Jefferson said at the Oscars. I really resonated with that. I really agreed with that, and it gave me a lot of hope. Why not tell these smaller budget stories with more people? Because those are, you know, these bigger budget films are also like huge risks. You know, I think it comes down to like your personal, my own individual passion for telling a story and directing and having something to say. And I think that independent filmmakers, we need to start carving out our space again. We need to find ways to get our films in front of people, you know, so people can actually see them. I think, you know, festivals can step up more in that regard too, because I think there's a lot of first-time filmmakers or people who don't have access to stars and celebrities that are really talented and are great writers and great directors. And there's cast out there that are not discovered that are amazing. Like I loved working with our two leads, and Issa and Wayne. We just had a great cast. So, you know, I think that there might be a new revolution for independent film coming out now, because
I hope so. I hope so. I just feel like these big budget films full of CGI and effects, and from what I understand, the business is sort of there's sort of a drought right now, that they're producing less and trying to cut back and cutting corners, and maybe this is the opportunity for smaller films like ours to come back again. You know, personal stories, small cast, and you know, in well-written little photo plays, basically.
Yeah,
I think maybe that's time for us to come back.
And maybe like streaming can offer a more democratic way of people choosing what they want to watch, you know, so there's opportunity there. And of course, I'm excited to see what happens in the next few years. I think things are going to shift, because I grew up in the 90s and I missed that decade of film.
I miss the 80s. I do.
I thought there was so much good film that came out in the 90s. And I feel like, you know, it was like these independent filmmakers who are doing different things, different styles, different stories, different voices. And I think we need that now. I think it's needed now.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is Hollywood, you know, they are the gatekeepers in terms of, you know, if you have your story, let's say you just sold it to Disney to do it, you know, it's no longer your story anymore. And, you know, they're in charge of your vision and your dream now. And I, you know, a story like this, it's a hard sell, because this is something people don't know about. It's also a small cast. It's also, you know, falls into the Western category and stuff. And I feel like that, that only independent filmmakers could make a movie like The War Between, because, you know, like the two of you there are passionate about that story, and are the guardians to see it through. And so I'm excited. That's why we exist. That's why we're here to help promote films like yours.
I mean, it is a Western, but it's other things too. It's sort of a mix of genres, you might say. But you know, it's like, if you're going to do something historical, which is what I'm sort of drawn to, I want to do something that's surprising and unique, because to me, the best movies are the ones that surprise me. If they surprise me, I'm willing to give them a pass on almost all of their faults. But if they surprise me, that's something. And so if I'm doing something historical, I'm trying to find something that's sort of a little known corner of history that at least an audience can say, I didn't know that. And that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. We were just talking about Planet of the Apes and how the original had something to say. It's a much bigger story than just a bunch of apes running the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got to thank you for talking with me, and The War Between. Let us know how we can see The War Between.
Well, right now we're doing the festival circuit for the next 8 months probably, and we have a sales agent at the Cannes Film Market right now with it. So we'll see. You know, we're fingers crossed to see where it finds a home. But we probably won't be released for probably next year, and we're going to be doing festivals until then.
All right. Do you have some festivals lined up soon, or are you still working on that?
Probably not until the fall.
Okay. All right. So we got chances to see The War Between. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Alan.